stand by. We're about to begin. Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Electricity and Natural Gas Price Risks This Winter and Beyond webinar. All audience lines will be in a listen-only mode during the program. However, you are encouraged to submit questions throughout the conference. Simply type your questions in the Ask a Question box located at the bottom left portion of your screen, and then click on the Submit button. Our speakers will address your questions at the end of the program as time permits. If you are having any technical difficulties with today's presentation, please select the Help button at the bottom of the screen for an event help guide. You may download the slides at any time by clicking the Download Presentation button at the bottom of the screen. Also, a link to the recorded presentation will be sent to you via email after the webinar. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I would like to turn the call over to Kevin Stafford. Please go ahead, sir.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Stafford, and I'm the Marketing Manager at GDF Suez Energy Resources. This time, I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar, Electricity and Natural Gas Price Risks This Winter and Beyond, with Andy Weissman. Andy's the Editor-in-Chief and Publisher of Energy Business Watch, as well as a Senior Energy Advisor at Haynes & Boone. We'll be concluding today's webinar with a question and answer session. And please note that the web conference is being recorded. We do have a diverse audience in the webinar session today. Participants include energy buyers from small businesses all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. Additionally, we have many third-party consultants and brokers on the line with us today. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Andy.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Certainly appreciate your being with us today. We once again have several hundred people listening into the program today, which we really appreciate. If we can go to the next slide. I'll just skip over that. I think most of you are familiar with my background, but if you're not, it'll be there in the slide deck. And today we're going to focus on really one major theme with a lot of specifics. And the major theme is the issue of evaluating, assessing energy price risks. And what I really mean by that is the importance of looking not only at what might be a most likely scenario, but to really understand both the upside and downside risks. What are the risks that prices are going to go up, potentially by how much, et cetera. And the way we're going to go about this is we're going to start by a discussion of the approach that we take to analyzing energy market risks. And then something we're really particularly excited about is that today is the national launch of a new, more comprehensive, we believe, better approach to assessing energy market risks than has existed previously. You're hearing about it first. We've been working very closely with Suez in developing this. We've entered into an exclusive arrangement in terms of distributing this to commercial industrial customers with Suez, and you are literally the first people who are going to hear about this. And we hope it'll be something that can be very helpful to you in your procurement decisions going forward. And then after giving you an overview of our approach, we're going to focus specifically on our market assessment and our risk assessment for 2014 and for 2015 and beyond. And finally, we're going to focus on 5 specific issues that have that are of particular interest to Suez's customers and contacts around the country, and we're going to discuss each of those in some detail. If we could go to the next slide. Essentially, here's the way. The next slide is titled the problem, and hopefully all of you can see it. And essentially, this is something that we've been focused on for quite a long time. And we believe, when I look at what's available in terms of what other competitive retail suppliers are providing and in terms of other sources of market analysis, to me it falls a step short of what I think many buyers feel that they need to make sound decisions. There are many sources of price forecasts for both electricity and natural gas. They tend to often differ significantly from one another. But the problem is, first of all, the real basis for them in terms of really understanding what's going on behind the curtain in terms of the market drivers that are affecting prices are pretty opaque, which so it makes it difficult to determine which price forecast you can most rely on. And secondly, there's very little emphasis in trying to analyze in any systematic way what the risks are of whether prices are going to go higher or lower, and just how significant those risks are, both in terms of percentage, likelihood, and in terms of how far prices might move. And there are some other shortcomings. One, there's still really most forecasts look at the electricity markets and the natural gas markets as if they were silos. They analyze the electricity price forecasts, tend to just plug in assumptions about natural gas prices. Natural gas forecasts tend to just plug in assumptions about electricity demand. And that's not the way it works anymore in a post-shale world. In a post-shale world, prices for both electricity and natural gas, as I think all of you know, are really driven day by day and hour by hour by competition between natural gas-fired generation and coal-fired generation. And therefore, really to understand how the market works and to assess prices accurately, it's really essential to analyze both markets on a fully integrated basis. And frankly, this is something we have been working on for years, and we think we're now able to do this in a very powerful way that's somewhat unique. And another major shortcoming of a lot of what's out there now is that it doesn't allow you to really quantify what the impact on prices might be of changes in weather or changes in U.S. supplies or any of the other factors that drive the market. And I think we all know during the winter, colder weather means prices are going to go up. Warmer weather means they're going to go down. That doesn't help very much in isolation. It's really important to understand how much. If prices go up because the forecast turns colder, is it justified? Did the market overshoot or undershoot? If we get more cold weather, what happens, not just in general terms, but specifically how much of a price increase would we expect to see? And so we've been working very hard on trying to develop the best techniques possible to analyze those issues. And the reason we think that's so important is that in discussions we have with so many of you, and we always are eager, if you have questions, please never hesitate to contact us. In the end, if all you have is a bunch of different price forecasts without a risk analysis, it's hard to make a decision. It's hard to have confidence that this is the right time to pull the trigger and make a procurement decision. And even if for so many of you really have very deep experience in the markets, even if you feel the time is right, it may be hard to really pull together the documentation that others internally whose approval you may need to seek may be asking for. So if we can go to the next slide. We really have been making a pretty intense effort to address every one of those problems and essentially to come up with the best quantitative techniques possible in order to analyze the market and to find ways to present them to you in the clearest, easiest to understand manner. And I've ticked off in this slide what we think are all the steps required, all the components that are necessary to properly analyze the market. I won't read through them one at a time since as I understand it, all of you can readily download the PowerPoint presentation and review them. But it's really, we think, it's necessary to analyze every single one of, for an analysis to include single one of these qualities. Our goal has been to develop a approach that really does two things. First of all, it allows us to communicate to you a very, very reliable forecast of what prices will be in a most likely scenario, and we're going to do that and address 2014 and beyond a little bit later. But secondly, it also allows us to assess a whole bunch of scenarios regarding weather and supply and coal prices and all the other factors that all of you know are relevant in determining prices for both electricity and natural gas, and then use that coupled with an analysis of all the other factors, market sentiment, technical analysis, the impact of regulatory requirements, in order to assess price risk. That's our goal, really, in a sense, my goal during the whole past decade, but certainly in the last 2 years in particular, we've been working very intensely to come up with the best tools to do that. If we can move to the next slide. Essentially, we think we've done that. Now, we have developed a set of tools that we are extremely excited about, that we think are finally are going to enable us and you to assess the electricity and natural gas markets in the way they really need to. And for us, the starting point, a lot of the work we've done over the last couple of years is that we've tried to draw on all the knowledge and experience we've had over a professional lifetime, really, to develop the strongest set of tools that we think anyone has ever developed to analyze the electricity and natural gas market on a fully integrated basis. And we've been very pleased with the results that we're getting. We're generally, in a most likely scenario, able to the solution we've developed, we've branded under the name EBW Market Pro, and it generally allows us to forecast prices in a base case, most likely kind of scenario within 1 or 2% in the natural gas market, and then for us to integrate that into impacts on electricity prices. And it also allows us to look at literally dozens or even hundreds of scenarios in a very compressed time period. And what we've done is that we've worked hard to find ways to present the results of the analysis we do in a way that hopefully be very concise and very easy for you to use, both in your own analysis of the market and in discussions with others within your companies. If we can move to the next slide. I'm going to go through these next several slides really very quickly because just really to wrap up the discussion of EBW Market Pro. Bottom line, for purposes of today's webinar, is that what we've done, we've made a special arrangement with Suez. Again, we're offering this to Suez's commercial and industrial buyers before anyone else in the country. and we've made a special arrangement that allows you to have an extended free trial of what we've done, and also gives special discounted price terms. And so the bottom line in terms of what we want to say about this new service that we're offering is, please, we think you'll really benefit. We really urge you, after the webinar is over today, is sign up for a free trial. There's no risk associated with it. This slide lays out. Just go to ebwmarketpro.com and at ebwmarketpro.com, you'll see highlighted right at the top of the web page that little white half moon that's circled in blue, a button you can click on. That'll take you to a landing page for a free trial. As I mentioned, because we've been working so closely with Suez and because they're going to be the exclusive distribution channel for us, we're offering special terms. So type in, when you go to the landing page, type in all caps Suez, and that will take you to an easy sign-up page to sign up for a free trial. If we can go to the next slide. In terms of what you'll get, if you do that, there are really three main components to it. We think there's an energy risk report that will be issued every month, and then a really spectacular interactive web platform I'll talk about in a second. And then we're going to do, in addition to the quarterly webcast for Suez, we're going to do a more frequent schedule for people who subscribe to this service, where we do a webcast every month on recent developments in the market. If we go to the next slide, we think for many of you, the part of this that you'll find most valuable is the risk report. I'm not going to go through the specifics here. I just wanted to give you a slide that'll give you more information if you want. If we can go to the next slide. What we're particularly excited about is that what we've done, as I mentioned, the starting point for us in analyzing the market is that we've tried to develop the most powerful set of quantitative tools to analyze supply and demand than we think has ever existed. We think at least those of you who want to really drill down and do as much of your own analysis as possible, in addition to having our conclusions in the energy risk report, can in a very user-friendly way analyze every possible scenario you want and see what's really driving prices for electricity and natural gas. We can go to the next slide. This is just highlighting that there will also be these monthly market casts as part of the service. And then if we can go to the next slide, and I'm just going to go through these next 2 or 3 slides really quickly, but essentially, in some respects, we think we've broken new ground here. What we've done is that we've created something that we're calling an interactive web-based market analysis platform. What it does is that it allows you to forecast natural gas prices and evaluate their impact on the electricity market in using either assumptions that we provide you, using EIA's current assumptions regarding supply and demand, or your views on any major factor that drives the market. You can put in your own supply numbers, your own weather numbers, your own expectations about how coal prices might change, you name it. And rather than my trying to explain this in any detail, what I would like to encourage you to do, my team has put together what I think is an absolutely terrific. I'm actually very proud of the job they did, online demonstration of this. All you have to do to find it is go onto YouTube and put in EBW Market Pro. It's only a couple minutes, and I think it will give you a really good sense of the quantitative side of what we do. If we can go to the next slide. The way it works is we've worked real hard to make this really user-friendly. We've built in a lot of preset scenarios, and essentially you go through 3 steps. You first decide whether you want to run one of our preset scenarios or customize your own assumptions, and you plug them in. We can go to the next slide. You then press submit, and our IT team has been working for more than a year to create a back end, basically, that allows you to take a very complex scenario that if you were trying to do it by spreadsheet, might take hours to run one scenario, and literally after you specified the parameters in step 1 and step 2, you press submit, and it completely analyzes the scenario, usually in 10 to 15 seconds. We can go to the next slide. Then you have a choice of outputs, and essentially it gives you all the basic data. Given the assumptions that if you press on natural gas price analyst, given you the assumptions that you specified in the scenario, it'll tell you what prices are likely to be, and it gives you specific data on storage outcomes and data on coal displacement, et cetera. If we can go to the next slide, that the data is made available to you in 2 ways. First, for every one of the buttons that I've just showed on the last slide, there's a comprehensive set of graphs which start by giving you U.S. totals for whatever the parameter is, and then break this down into, I think it's 11 regions nationally, and give you a graph for each of them. And then if we can go to the next slide, which is the last one about EBW Market Pro, you also then can take all the data that's been generated by the model and download it and use it in whatever way would be most helpful to you. So that's a real quick overview. This is the official national launch of EBW Market Pro. We've been working on this very closely with Suez for a long time. We really think it's a special benefit to Suez's customers to have the ability to access this before anyone else in the country, and to be able to do that on favorable terms. And we hope you'll take advantage of the free trial that we're offering. It's easy to sign up. Now, in turn, essentially, what the rest of the program does is that it does 2 things. First of all, it applies the analytical tools that I've just mentioned to assess both the electricity and natural gas market, and we'll divide that assessment into 2 parts. And one is we'll talk about the immediately upcoming 12-month period, both this coming winter and the rest of 2014, and then we're going to talk a little bit about longer term. And so that'll be the market assessment portion of the remainder of the webinar, and then we're going to talk about those 5 specific issues that are particular to specific regions that were on the agenda page at the outset. If we can go to the next slide, actually maybe skip past the divider, the section header, to the next substantive slide. In terms of this winter, we've had some, as happens so often, we've had another significant surprise with the weather that's having a pretty major impact on the market. I wanted to start with this particular slide just because it reinforces yet again a theme I think we've been talking about in essentially every webinar. I mean, we really seem to be in a world now where more often than not, the models, the meteorologists don't quite get it right, and where often, even when we're just talking about the 16 to 30 day forecast window, and especially when we start talking about 1 month out or longer, the weather turns out to be much different than was expected, and we think it's just critical for all of us to be focusing on that in making procurement decisions, because what it can mean, and in fact has meant in the last 3 or 4 weeks, is that we are frequently getting weather surprises. We think it's critical to recognize that might occur. A lot of the focus of the risk analysis that we do is to recognize that it might occur, and to then take the knowledge that might occur and quantify it. So we know what the upside price risks of deferring a purchase decision, and quite frankly, the surprises have been so frequent, and they can go in either direction. Obviously, we can have a colder weather than expected in the winter, or hotter in the summer, or we can have just the reverse. But the risk of these surprises is so great that overall it argues very strongly that in favor of a portfolio approach that understands where the market is and where it might go, and stays out of the market at times if prices look like they really most likely are higher than they're going to be longer term, but err on the side of the caution. And when prices drop to more reasonable levels as part of a portfolio approach, cover a portion of your position. Because whatever the most likely case may look like at any particular point, we could get a weather surprise just like what we've seen now. What we've seen now is that the map on the left here shows you what most meteorologists were forecasting in late October for November weather, which was a pretty balmy November. And the graph on the right is showing you what actually happened in November, which is the second coldest November in the 2000s. And what we're seeing in the first, I saw a metric this morning that in the first 19 days of December look like they're going to go down as I think it was the 13th coldest in the just under 120 years for which the National Weather Service has data. And that's what happens with the market, and so we need to be aware of that. And what's happened is, I think all of you know, is that extremely cold weather has caused a pretty sharp run-up in natural gas prices. We prepared this slide last night. This morning, the EIA storage report was slightly higher than our estimate and way higher than a lot of other people's estimates of what the storage report might be today. Specifically, it was a withdrawal of 162 BCF, which for the last week in November is one of the largest withdrawals we've had in a very long time. It's larger than the withdrawals for the entire month of November that we've had frequently in the past. That storage report this morning finally has pushed prices through $4, at least for now. And on the one hand, we think and it's also, these circumstances have driven up electricity prices in roughly $3 to $6 per megawatt hour. We think in most regions of the country, ERCOT is one big exception, and I'll talk about that further in a second. But we have seen a pretty big increase, and when we quantify it, we think that run-up is somewhat overdone, but not a whole lot. We think that basically there's been that most of the increase in prices that's occurred over the last few weeks is, our analysis shows, gives us a whole lot of confidence. We ask the question, is the market overreacting or underreacting? And the answer is that, that extreme cold weather has burned up a lot of natural gas, and that should, in terms of that additional demand from that cold weather should have an impact on prices, and the market has probably overdone it a little bit, but which is not surprising early in the winter, because it kind of cautions people that the winter as a whole could turn out to be very cold, but in ways that frankly we couldn't quantify a year ago, but we can quantify now. We see that based upon the additional demand that's actually occurred, the reaction is not a huge overreaction. I mean, what happens will depend on whether for the remainder of the winter and for the rest of 2014, but at least as much of the increase that's occurred is justified by the demand that has occurred. If we go to the, I apologize, I forgot to give the request to skip a slide. So if we can really just cover the next slide, that's called Significant Recent Rally. So if we can go to the slide after that, which is called Direct Impact on Electricity Markets, that's the right place for us to be now. Now let me wait till that shows up, at least on my screen. It hasn't appeared yet. There it is. And I think all of you are aware, these increases in or decreases in natural gas prices generally do flow over into the electricity market. They are not the only factor that affects the electricity market. We're seeing right now in particular there are developments in several of the RTOs where there's special issues that have developed that are having major price implications, and that's part of what we analyze in depth in our energy risk reports. But the general pattern is certainly, and those can in the affected areas are tending to cause even steeper increases in electricity prices. But there's no question that as a general matter, electricity is still, as shown in the graph on the left, is still closely tracking natural gas, and you can see it in the graph on the left. If you look at the far right, that the run-up in natural gas prices has, in fact, and PJM is one illustration, led to a commensurate increase, and maybe even a little bit more so, in prices for on the electricity side of the market. The one exception, as I mentioned, if you look at the graph to the right, in terms of the recent price movements, has been in ERCOT. And there really is a specific reason for that, that essentially ERCOT, no question ERCOT is sensitive to gas prices, but we also saw at the beginning of November the resource adequacy assessment from ERCOT itself, and that tended to suggest that at least near term there'll be sufficient capacity in ERCOT, and that therefore caused prices in ERCOT to drop. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, but the bottom line that I want to stress here is that my belief fairly strongly is that essentially in the last year we sort of lucked out in ERCOT, that conditions were mild enough from a weather standpoint, and generator performance was good enough so that we didn't see all that many price spikes. But my view is that essentially that ERCOT is underestimating the risk of future problems, and that I therefore, in terms of the recommendations that we make to the end users to whom we provide direct advice, we view this drop that occurred in November as a real buying opportunity in ERCOT, and if I were advising for any of you who are in ERCOT, my advice would be that there is some chance that prices will drop a little bit if the weather cooperates during the rest of the winter and a number of other things fall in place. But I view current price levels attractive enough and the downside potential as limited enough so that I would be inclined to pull the trigger right now and take advantage of this, because I think a time will come, and it's very hard to predict when, but a time will come when it will become clear that ERCOT is underestimating future risks, and so that there's a real advantage of taking advantage of current price levels. If we can go to the next slide. One last kind of background bit of information before turning directly to our analysis of this year is that of 2014 is basically that it looks like the slide hasn't necessarily popped up yet, but what it's showing you is it's quantifying for you what the impact is of natural gas storage. There it is on natural gas storage of the cold weather we've had, and what you'll see is that at the start of November, the amount of gas in storage was actually above the 5-year average and not very far from the high level that it was in 2012. And that has been changing rapidly. It's changed rapidly during November, and if current forecasts hold, there will be a fairly significant storage deficit that will develop by the end of December, particularly relative to last year. Last year was a little bit unusual, but also a fairly large deficit, 224 BCF, relative to the 5-year average. And there's no question that is going to that tends to be supportive of higher natural gas prices and tends to have an upward effect on electricity prices in many regions. And we've generally found that in terms of predicting natural gas prices, if you look at the graph on the right, that there's a pretty strong inverse correlation between natural gas prices and storage versus the 5-year average. If there is more gas, if you look at the right-hand side, if there's more gas in storage than the 5-year average, if there's a surplus, prices for natural gas, as shown by the black line, tend to go down. If that surplus shrinks or we move into a deficit, it almost always leads to increased prices. So that's an important factor. Now, if we go to the next slide, in terms of applying our model, here's just show you a list of all the factors that we take into account that drive prices. And these are all inputs into our model, and I provided you with a little capsule comments on the near-term risk implications and the current price signal. We put those in, and obviously, if we go to the next slide, of those inputs, the most important is the weather. Weather also is one regarding which the outcomes are going to inevitably have a lot of risk associated with them. And if we can go to the next slide after that, implications for buyers, explain the methodology and the steps we go through in the analysis. What's the bottom line in terms of where we think prices will happen. What I'd like to ask each of you to do is to focus on the graph on the left. And what the graph on the left is showing is the results of all the detailed quantitative analysis we do, and it's looking at a wide range of scenario analysis, and it's defining both a most likely case and a whole range of other cases, including in particular what's the 20th or 25th percentile case, and what's in terms of how far prices might sink, and what's the 75 or 80th percentile case in terms of how prices for natural gas might rise. And as you'll see, if you look first at the most likely bar in the middle, what that bar is looking at is based upon a statistical analysis where we've looked at a broad range of weather forecasts and a large number of modeling runs from the different weather ensemble versions of the different weather models, that our analysis indicates that in the current most likely scenario, we're going to see we're going to see a moderate tapering off of natural gas prices over the course of the winter, and in particular, in terms of the single most likely number, a average price in January through March of $3.83, and that compares to a close just right almost exactly around $4 for the January-March contracts yesterday, and that's up. Before we walked into the room in which we're presenting this, it was up about 9 cents today. So we think that nationally there is some potential for a moderate decline in prices, and depending upon your risk appetite, that might suggest that this week probably isn't the week to pull the trigger. In terms of what we think is the most likely scenario as to what will happen and the key factors to monitor at this point, the pivotal issue at this point really relates to weather, in particular, two particular aspects of weather. One is something called the Alaskan Ridge, and the other is a Greenland Ridge. And essentially, the Alaskan, what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and are going to see over the next week or two, is basically that there has been a ridge, a high-pressure system that's been sitting in the Gulf of Alaska. And that's essentially what's allowed Arctic air to channel into the United States, and it's also tended to block the west to east flows from the Pacific that make temperatures milder. And the key question now is whether that will persist or shift. And essentially right now, most of the models are suggesting that it probably will shift. Not a certainty, and again, I've emphasized that we all need to be very mindful of weather uncertainty, but that seems to be the most likely scenario. And if that happens, then we are likely to see some moderation in temperatures, and we estimate essentially that compared to where, assuming we're, let's say, roughly 405 today for natural gas, that to us suggests that there's a potential between basically, let's say, a 15 to 30 cent drop in natural gas price, and the midpoint of that is right around 383. And at the same time, the advice that we would give is that that particular situation and a couple of other major winter drivers from the weather, including whether there's something called stratospheric warming or other blocking conditions, this next 3, 4, 5 weeks are really, if you're thinking about a procurement decision soon, it's really important to monitor those very closely, and it's very, very important to if you have any uncovered positions for this winter, to be tracking those very closely. If conditions evolve the way that seems, most likely there will be a moderation, but it is still possible that colder weather, that this very cold weather will reoccur frequently. If the ridge doesn't, the current expectations is the ridge will shift from the Gulf of Alaska in the direction of Russia into the Bering Sea. If that occurs, we should see some moderation. If it doesn't, or if we unexpectedly get stratospheric warming, or if there's a strong ridge that develops over Greenland, if any of those things happen, prices could still shoot up significantly, and there are a few ensemble runs that suggest that's possible. So if you look at the right, our 75th percentile number is 426, and we think there's a pretty good likelihood, odds are pretty high that the end results this winter are going to be between our 25th percentile and our 75th percentile. And I'd say, notwithstanding the run-up today, we're fairly hopeful that there'll be slight pullback, but we want to highlight the risks as well. Now, if we can go to the next slide. Next slide basically uses the same kind of analysis and shows what our predicted natural gas prices are for the remainder of this year. That situation we think will become is still somewhat in doubt until we see what happens in the winter. The severity of winter weather has more impact on prices than any other factor, and what this, once we see where we're most likely heading for end of winter storage, we can get even more definitive regarding prices for the rest of the year. As you see on the right, the concern would be that we get enough cold weather that prices, that end of season storage goes down to 1550 BCF, in which case the upside price risk would increase, especially if we have a hot summer. If we go to the next slide, this shows you in a pretty precise way how this translates into potential impacts on natural gas prices, on electricity prices. If we can then go, the next slide after that is a section divider, so if we can just skip over that, I want to talk briefly about what to expect going further out in time, and we promise that in today's webinar we focus really on this year's prices rather than further beyond, but I have particularly strong views and recommendations to offer longer term, and maybe at some point what we're doing with all these, the issues I've just covered are regarding 2014. We're going to go into in considerably more depth for any of you who sign up for the free trial subscription to the Energy Risk Report. We'll have a much more detailed analysis of this, and we also will address in more detail price expectations for 2015 and beyond. The bottom line, though, of this extremely important topic is basically we've got two things going on here, and there tends to be a focus on one side of the equation, but it's important to focus on both. The first side of the equation is that, as I think every one of you are aware, the U.S. production of natural gas is continuing to be very robust, and the two graphs at the bottom kind of give you help illustrate that, because they're showing you that essentially, even though the rig count is going way down, we're getting so much more production per rig, particularly in Marcellus Shale on the right, that notwithstanding the steep cuts both in capital expending on the and the rig count, that we're seeing modest continued increases in U.S. production, and it's offset to some degree by declines in Canadian imports, but on a net basis, we're still seeing a modest increase in supplies this year, and we will again next year as well. What's important is two things. One is to emphasize, as I often do, that prices are exquisitely sensitive to relatively small swings in the balance between supply and demand. So what's been happening is so far it's been good news. We've been getting enough of an increase in supply, so it's generally keeping pace with the really pretty modest increases in demand that we've been seeing, and so prices have remained moderate. And that is leading to predictions that essentially the good news will continue and that prices will remain moderate indefinitely. And I think it's certainly possible that that will happen, but I think there's also a huge amount of upside price risk, huge, and that's being underestimated. And the reason I say that is that because prices are so, we've been in a situation where increases in supply are slightly outpacing increases in demand, but it wouldn't take much to get into the reverse scenario. And if we get in the reverse scenario where increases in demand start to increases in supply, we could see prices go up quite significantly for both electricity and natural gas. And essentially, what we may see is not just that increases in demand outpace increases in supply, but we may see literally an unprecedented explosion of demand for natural gas in the U.S. market between now and the end of the decade. And if you can focus on the graph on the right of the next slide, the graph on the right on the next slide is going to show you once it appears on your screen, will show you the potential increases for demand in natural gas. We've seldom in the past seen even a 1 BCF a day year-over-year increase in core demand. We've seen somewhat greater increases in demand when the market is so oversupplied that prices have collapsed in order to induce a lot of coal displacement. But in terms of core demand, the increases in demand have tended to be really relatively small. But there is a lot in the works. And what the graph on the right is showing you, a key here is that it's not just one source of potential increased demand. It's many. And the potentially single most important is LNG. That won't start until a little later in the decade, but it's not that far off. The first LNG terminal, it's Sabine Pass project in Louisiana. First units are going to go online, and the first train is going to go online in the first quarter of 2016. That's not so far off anymore. We're talking about a little more than 24 months, and the demand from even a single LNG project is enormous, as the graph on the left shows. But those won't really take hold until affect demand in really major ways till later in the decade. But what we are going to see even sooner is that there is likely to be an explosion of exports to Mexico. There are a lot of reasons for that. There are a lot of pipelines that are going into service right now to hook up Mexico with the U.S., and Mexico needs more natural gas, so we could start seeing major increases in Mexican exports soon, and even more coal retirements and replacement with natural gas-fired generation. And so there is a very substantial risk that we are going to see some imbalances. And essentially the bottom line, and again, this is worthy of its own webinar on just this topic, the bottom line is that we could easily see unprecedented increases in demand year on top of year after year. They could start fairly soon. They can potentially be avoided if there's enough planning to procure supplies in advance. But right now, the LNG purchasers are not lining up dedicated resources. The power producers building natural gas-fired plants are not lining up long-term contracts. And I think there's a very high risk that we're going to see some really major price increases. And the implication that has in my mind is that I strongly urge looking very seriously at locking up a portion of your electricity requirements several years in advance to a much greater degree than you have in the past. And the Sapphire, the analytical tool we have, and the Energy Risk Report will help illustrate to you very specifically the price risk, and I frankly think that they will be sobering, and so another reason I hope you sign up for the trial subscription. If we can skip the next divider slide and go to the first slide on ERCOT, it basically showing you, I've already stressed the key points, big risk here, that we're going to see capacity deficits over time, good time to try to protect against that by taking advantage of what I think are going to prove to be relatively favorable prices, not for this year, and even better prices extending that. I think that today's strip for 15, 16, 17, I think is going to look like a great bargain when we get further down the road. If we can skip the next slide perhaps and go to the Northeast pipeline congestion, one of the specific regional issues. Really, there's an overall pattern here in terms of the risk analysis. And I think what the pattern is that I think is really very sobering is that we've not yet seen the big increase in demand for natural gas, and we've only seen a moderate number of coal-fired plant retirements, and we've not yet seen the wave of new natural gas-fired additions. But what we're seeing is that in the RTOs, the system is we're already seeing some significant problems from retirements that are occurring and other factors. And the quasi-regulatory system we have with the RTOs is not working particularly well to solve them. And that is, I think, furthers my concern about long-term price risk, because essentially if the system isn't dealing well with what, from a national perspective, are the first hiccups, it really underscores concerns about where prices might head longer term and the potential advantages of procuring a portion of your needs now. And when I say hiccups, some of these we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars already with problems that are occurring right now, hard facts on the ground, and could get worse. And the first problem on slide 34 is one that all of you in New England are painfully familiar with, which is the effects of pipeline congestion into New England. And maybe even if we can skip to the next slide to illustrate the pipeline problem. Essentially, the problem is a significant major structural problem of great concern. And it's existed for many years, and there's only a little bit of relief in sight, and the relief in sight is probably not going to be adequate. And what the problem is that when we get to the winter months, the demand for natural gas in New England exceeds the ability to move gas into the region. And that causes two potential problems. One, it has caused and may again this winter cause frequent, sometimes really very severe price spikes in the price for getting natural gas delivered into New England. And secondly, in an extreme case, it can create a situation in which there simply isn't enough during periods of cold weather, there isn't enough natural gas to operate all the natural gas-fired generating units in a region that's heavily dependent on natural gas. And that can potentially lead to blackouts. Essentially, this problem is ironic and painful, and we're having absolutely soaring production of natural gas not that far away in Marcellus Shale, particularly in Pennsylvania. Record increases in production, plenty of supply. The amount of natural gas produced in Marcellus Shale and Utica Shale will soon exceed average demand in all of the Northeast, including New York. It is extremely painful that there should be a problem of not being able to get enough natural gas into New England under those circumstances. But basically, the ground rules, the pricing rules in New England ISO and the incentives, the FERC rules for building new pipelines don't mesh, and they're creating a situation, well, even though everyone in New England would benefit tremendously by building new pipeline capacity, there's very little that is going in or likely to go in anytime in the next several years. And the one project that's going forward is the Algonquin Incremental Market Pipeline that's showing on the right. That will help somewhat, but essentially we're also seeing some really major retirements of non-natural gas-fired generation. And if we can go to the next slide while I'm finishing this one, just to save transition time, we're seeing the retirement at the end of next year of the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant, and we have the announced retirement of the Brayton Point coal-fired plant, which is the largest coal-fired plant in New England. And the retirement of those two nuclear and fossil coal units will eat up a significant portion of the new pipeline that's going to be added in 2016. So this is a critical problem from New England. It's already led January prices for ONTI prices in New England ISO are up above $130. It's the highest per megawatt hour. That's the highest since 2006. This is a problem that has to be solved, but there's not a solution in motion yet, which is really very painful. If the next slide talks about what New England is doing near term, which is the Winter Reliability Program, and essentially the core of this basically has been to try to take maximum advantage of the existing oil-fired capacity or dual natural gas and oil capacity that exists. If we can stay for a second, please, on the slide that says New England ISO Winter Reliability Program, which is one slide back of what seems to be displayed now. The core of that program is to try to take better advantage of the ability to use oil-fired generation in New England, and also to give further encouragements to demand response. And those are certainly positive steps, and they may well work in avoiding the need for blackouts, but they don't do a whole lot in terms of keeping prices at a moderate level. They're designed for reliability purposes. Using oil is still very expensive, and therefore you can still have very high natural gas prices before the oil units get turned on. And so that is a serious problem. And unfortunately, because there's not new pipeline, if we can go to the next slide now, because there's not new pipeline capacity being built, this is a problem that could get worse. If we go to the next slide on lower Hudson Valley capacity change, this is another example where the regulatory system isn't working particularly well right now. This one's huge, could lead to $450 million a year in increased cost for the affected customers in New York. Nobody knows for sure. There's a lot of price exposure, but you definitely, if you're in New York, you should take full advantage of all the good advice that GDF Suez offers. Sit down with your representative, make sure you understand what the options are for dealing with this. What the problem is, this relates to the capacity charge in New York. And basically, until now, today, for this winter still, essentially, the situation is that for most of New York, if you look at the map of New York, everything north of New York City, essentially you can buy capacity rights anywhere. Your load server, your service provider can buy capacity rights anywhere in the state. If you're in New York, most of the generation to serve New York is in the city, and so you have to buy separate capacity rights that cover most of your requirements that are in New York, and it's only the balance of your demand where you can go to the rest of the state to buy capacity, but you can buy some of what you need from the rest of the state. Similar thing in Long Island. What's happened is that as a result of a variety of factors, including retirement of an important coal-fired plant just outside the city called Danskamer. I guess whether you call it just outside depends upon exactly where in New York you live, but relatively close to in the Hudson Valley. There is not currently enough generation in the Hudson Valley area to serve the load there, nor is there enough transmission to build to bring in sufficient power into that area in combination with local generation to serve peak demand on the highest day. And as a result of that, there's some impact of all this on New York City customers and on Long Island customers, but particularly if you're in that green area in the map on the right. Essentially, you no longer will be able to cover all of the capacity obligation by buying capacity rights from generating units north of that area. You'll have to buy potentially a pretty large percentage of your capacity rights from resources or through demand-side response or otherwise. There'll be a separate capacity rights market that will be for capacity rights that are in the lower Hudson Valley. And that separate capacity market that goes into effect in May of 2014, you just aren't sufficient resources to bid into it, so you may have to cover more than 80% of your capacity requirements by purchases in that zone, and there's just not enough in that zone. And so there could be, not all the rules, details have been finalized, and no one knows for sure how the prices might work out, but there are some estimates that there could be as much as a 1.6 cent per kilowatt hour increase in the average cost for electricity for commercial industrial customers inside the green zone. And there are options being offered in the marketplace. Some opportunities to buy power with somebody else taking the risk of what the charge will be. Others where you're exposed to the risk. It's a big number, and it's important to seek advice, if you haven't already, for you to seek advice. And I've worked with a lot of the GDF Suez people. There are others as well you can talk to, but I can certainly, I'm confident that Suez has the people who can help you understand the specific options that are available to you, and this is a big issue. The last slide I'll talk to in the program, the last two slides all address one issue. I'll just comment on it very briefly because it's narrower in focus than the other, and that is we've had questions about the Massachusetts carve-out for solar in the renewable energy program. Essentially, the short version of this would be essentially every load-serving entity in Massachusetts has to provide a minimum threshold of the energy provides, either has to be directly from renewable energy resources or through buying renewable energy credits that reflect somebody else's generation from renewable energy sources. And that's Right now, the original requirement was that 8% of energy come from renewable energy sources, and that's going to be ramped up over time to 15%. What Massachusetts has further done on top of that is that it's trying to give strong incentives to solar. And so it says that in meeting that requirement, that 18 to 15% of it, 8% in 2009, 15% in 2020 has to come from renewable. There's a certain minimum amount of that renewable that has to come from solar. And that's the carve-out. The carve-out is that you can't use wind or any other form of renewable to meet 100% of the renewable energy, the RPS requirement, the Renewable Portfolio Standard requirement. A certain portion of it has to come from solar. And in the first phase, the amount that had to come from solar was 400 megawatts. Essentially, the fact that your supplier has to provide certain percentage, either by buying from solar or by buying credits that were generated as a result of construction of solar, means that there's a high value for those credits. It's been several times greater than the value for credits, for other types of credits, and that has worked as a very powerful incentive. The 400 megawatts is already being built, and so Massachusetts is looking seriously at quadrupling the requirement and saying that the solar carve-out, rather than being 400 megawatts, will be 1,600 megawatts, and that be great for solar and would provide a very strong incentive because of the politics in Massachusetts. I think there's a pretty good chance they'll adopt that much higher carve-out requirement, but that will definitely, until that solar is built, that will tend to drive up the cost of the credits as these requirements are phased in over time. So I think that covers everything we listed in the agenda. I don't think, unfortunately, we do have your questions, and so we will respond to them afterwards. I think, Kevin, unless you feel differently, that we probably have to wrap up the presentation now, but again, we're really excited about this exclusive offer that we have with Suez for our new suite of products. We think it'll be a terrific aid to you in your decision making and encourage you to sign up for a free trial. Appreciate very much, as always, your attention. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andy. You're correct. We actually do not have time today to address any of the questions. However, as he mentioned, we may be able to get some of those questions answered in the follow-up. Once the recording is available, you all will be receiving a link to the recorded webinar. I'd like to thank Andy for presenting, and thank you all for joining us today. Please call us at 866-999-8374 if you have any questions about electricity needs or if you're at all interested in receiving a quote from us in the future. Thank you for joining us.
And Kevin, if I could also just comment, because if you have questions and you've not yet posed them or you don't otherwise get a response, please don't hesitate to email me directly, and I'll respond to them promptly, and my email address information is on the very last slide in the deck.
That's great. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks.